Välkomna till Arkitekturdagarna i Malmö. Varje timme under de här dagarna planeras tillsammans med och leds av en samarbetspartner. På temat Natur och Arkitektur har Nätverket Malmös Arkitekter bjudit in 2 talare. Dessa presenteras av Nätverkets representant Alexander Simittchiev från Stadstudio. Välkommen Alex!
Tack så mycket. Ja, Alexander Simittchiev heter jag, som sagt, kommer från Stadstudio Arkitekter här i Malmö och jag representerar Malmös arkitektnätverk. Vi träffas med jämna mellanrum och vi samverkar kring frågor om arkitektur och samhällsbyggnad såklart, och får driva Malmö framåt i sin utveckling. Now I'm gonna switch to English because we have a couple of international guests. Today's topics is nature and architecture. And often for us architects, it seems to be a contradiction. We have to choose one or another. But the struggle for us working with sustainable cities is to find a combination, of course, to build the future cities. We often talk about ecology of nature. That's very familiar for us, but I think it's very important that we talk and discuss the ecology of urban space. Because when we architects work with cities and sites, they have different DNAs and different grammars, and we have to deal with that with care. Big challenges ahead, so to speak. Anyway, today we have 2 very interesting lecturers who maybe can help us with that and lead the way. From Berlin and London, we have Casper from Casper Mueller Architects, which was established at 2010 and have since then produced numerous of high quality and very interesting projects. But first, we will listen to Rasmus Vincentz from Habitats in Malmö and Copenhagen. And he works with the interaction of nature and society and how we citizens can be educated to blend nature with urban development. Please welcome Rasmus Vincentz.
Yes, hello everyone, and what a great pleasure to be here. My name is Rasmus Vincentz, and yes, as Alexander said, we'll talk about architecture and nature, and I also will take you through very briefly the what, the why, and the how of how I suggest that we see and work with nature in relation to architecture. And yes, and some 8 years ago, with my 2 friends and colleagues, we established a company called Habitats, and that was, I guarantee, we established it to work with the sole purpose of biodiversity, a rich and diverse nature. I will come more into what that means in detail later, but we said the world really needs a company who can sell, who can make it economic feasible and interesting to integrate a rich and diverse nature in whatever human activity we are doing. I guarantee you it was a very lonely experience back in 2010-11 to work with biodiversity and try to call municipalities or companies and say, hey, would you like to buy some biodiversity? And they said, what is that? Since then, we have come a long way, not just because we have become better at it, but also because things have definitely changed in relation to biodiversity the last 7-8 years. That is a process that is really gaining momentum now. As some of you might be aware, right now there is a United Nations agreement on biodiversity that runs until 2020, which is next year, and the goal of that was to stop the loss of global biodiversity. Unfortunately, we're not even close to achieve that goal. So right now, there's a lot of United Nations negotiation going on to making what is anticipated to be a Paris-style agreement for nature, a new deal for nature. And I guarantee you that will really, really make the interest and the curiosity about what is biodiversity and how to work with it. That will make that explode. So be prepared. It's going to be a hot topic in the years to come. So we established the company, 3 of us. Now the woman, she left since then, but we still have to come. And we like to have as a guideline for what we do is we work for a positive coexistence between humans and nature. And that is very important. That is very important. Let's stick to that. But first of all, that word biodiversity, biologisk mangfold, what is it and how is it that we perceive it? This is actually a picture of planet Earth. You might recognize the continents, North America over there, South America, Europe and Asia, Africa around here, Australia. That is how we like to think of the world as of today. We like to think of it as totally populated with a lot of fantastic, beautiful species, from the pandas to the tigers to the gorillas, elephants, llamas and bisons and whatever all over the world. And that is one way of perceiving the world and one way of perceiving biodiversity, as a lot of the beautiful and iconic species inhabiting the different continents. Yes, there is something to it, but we have to understand biodiversity is first and foremost a quantitative measure. How many different species can you have in a certain area? Yes, that is biodiversity. But biodiversity is also much more about the qualitative measures. How many different species and different interactions of the species can you sustain over time? So it's not just enough to squeeze 100 interesting species into a zoo and say, wow, this is biodiversity. It is also about to making them thriving and multiplicate over a long time. 100 years, 1,000 years, whatever. So, and now we like to think of the world as this iconic picture with a lot of different species. But unfortunately, this is just a dream about how the world looks like. It used to maybe look like a little bit like that, and this is how we like to present it when we watch nature documentaries and TV. This is how we like to present it when we watch Walt Disney movies with entertaining animals on the African savannah or whatever. This is how we like to present the world for kids when they play with a lot of giraffes and elephants and whatever in the rooms. This is an idealistic understanding of, wow, we still have a rich and diverse nature. But unfortunately, we are losing species and nature at a rapid speed. Earlier this year in May, the organization called IPBES, it's an interdisciplinary science platform, just like the IPCC of climate change. They came out with a global assessment. And the chairman of that one, Mr. Robert Watson, he stated, the health of ecosystems on which we and other species depend is deteriorating more rapid than ever. We are eroding the very foundation of our economies, livelihood, food security, health, and quality of life worldwide. So here we see, on the one hand, yes, we like to think about biodiversity as these iconic, beautiful species that are nice to have. But when enough of them starts to deteriorate, it becomes a crucial question about sustaining the very livelihood on Earth as we know it. It becomes a question about sustaining the life-supporting systems that we cannot and will not live without. This is the peril that the situation about loss of biodiversity and ecosystems are in right now. Some even compare it to the mass extinction of species we had 65 million years ago when the dinosaurs got wiped out by a meteor. We saw the same disappearance of species as we see today. That's why some people like to call it the 6th mass extinction. That's what we experience right in front of our eyes right now. And another way to present that is from the WWF, the Worldwide Foundation for Nature, and they make a biannual report, and also followed 16,000 different population of species and 4,000 different animals in that. And they had, since the 70s, we seem to have lost around 60% of those population. That does not mean that the specific species has become extinct, it doesn't disappear, but the whole level of how many of them are there left out there is just going down 60%. It's more or less since I was born. That is the rapid of loss that we experience right outside of the windows as of today. This is really a challenge that we have to step up to. And then some of you might think, what does that have to do with architecture? And here comes a crucial point. Just let me take one example. It's a Danish guy. His name is Jan Gehl. Some of you might know him. Back in the early 70s, he published a very, very important report that is called Life Between Buildings. It's a masterpiece, and it's fantastic. And let me be very clear here. I have a huge respect for Jan Gehl and his work, and I have a huge respect for the company Gehl Architects that are still in operation today, and they do fantastic work in urban development in New York. They do rebuilding of Christchurch in New Zealand. They do important work in Bangladesh as well. A lot of wonderful things. But the reason why I bring them on here is they could be a representative of what you can call the classical architecture understanding, because in the very beginning of that sentence and in the very fundament of the work, they still do in Gehl Architects life between the buildings. They interpret life in the narrowest possible sense. Life for them is just human beings. Life for them is just about making a good life in urban areas for human beings. And I've met with people from Gehl Architects, and I question and say, how come you do only interpret life as narrow as human beings? And they said, yeah, but we used to do this, and it's also important. But at the end of the day, what would happen if they, as representative of many other architects, open up and said, yes, we would like to interpret life in the broadest possible form. We would then like to include birds and fungi and mosses and insects and beetles and butterflies and whatever of all this variety of life that is still around us. And there could be so much more of it around us. What if they were having a goal of saying we do not just make networks between people, we make also networks with the other so-called non-human species that we share the planet with. How different would the architectural approach be? And life is in cities. This is from Malmös, just down here, some old railway tracks very close to Ripan. And one great summer evening I brought my son there, and this is clearly illustrating the type of places that still are in cities like Malmö or Copenhagen or Stockholm or Berlin, where I've just been. This totally crazy wild nature areas that is not looking like nature areas as the big reserves that we like to watch in nature programs. It is a nature areas that is wild, that it partly man-made, that is kind of artificial because it used to be railway tracks. And it's the type of biodiversity that is not the green niceness that we like to portray. This is the wild biodiversity that is sustaining a lot of different lives. I mean, these species, they are native species. They come there because they suit there. They are there because the insects love them. I mean, some of them are the host plants of maybe 150 different species of bees and butterflies and whatever who feed only on those plants. I mean, so yes, we like there are some birds in our city. We like the birds sing in the morning when we wake up. But they have to have something to eat. And maybe, I mean, a family of starlings eat 10 kilos of bugs to feed their kids in the summer. Those 10 kilos of bugs have to eat somewhere. These are the places where they eat. This is where the places where the food chains and ecosystems can start. And they are fantastic. But at the same time, areas like this, I guarantee a lot of people consider it nothing. It is just a nowhere area. It is just an area waiting to be built into something else, into a whatever parking spot or shopping mall or whatever, to become something. But right now it is really something if you have the eye for the understanding of the complexity and the beauty of biodiversity. Then this is really something. And another point about it. We like to think about nature is this wild and pristine areas out there somewhere. But first of all, it is not out there somewhere anymore. Even the natural parks and areas are shrinking. The nature quality of them we are losing. So when we work with biodiversity and habitats, we realize very fast the most interesting nature is happening in urban areas. That's where actually we have continuity. That's where we have big variation. And that's of course where we have the public exposure, where people can learn about nature. And in this area, the reason why I brought my son and put him in the very front of it is because we like to think about nature as where human beings are not. So either we have a lot of human activities or we have the pristine and wild nature. But the curious part is how can we make those two worlds merge? How can we make positive coexistence possible? And in this area you see over here, that is actually, when people are shortcutting here and walk, they contribute to the quality of nature, because the footsteps, they are creating a disturbances that give place for new kind of species to arrive there and thrive. So humans are not only nice to have in nature, humans can sometimes be needed in nature areas to sustain a high quality nature. We should not be ashamed ourselves, we should not be just staring at it from the outside. Since the world is so out of balance, there is a huge need for human beings to step in and actively play a role in redesigning urban landscape to have a high biodiversity. And we tried that in Habitats last year. We were invited by the energy company called Ørsted. They have a headquarter in southern Denmark, and they said, we have just created this gigantic green lawn outside our cantina. And then they realized how boring that actually is. So they invited us to come and reshape the whole green area. I think it's 2,000 or 3,000 square meters. And we said we would do that, but we want to include as much biodiversity as possible. So we restructured it, creating differences. Some is dry, some is wet, some is sun exposed, some is in the shadow, some is lively with seeds, and some is like dead trees, because a lot of insects live from dead trees. So we try to squeeze in as much life as possible there. We did it last autumn, and we were so curious to see how it's going to develop this spring. And we are very happy to see the result. It's still early for an ecosystem. It takes way more than just one season. But already now we have got so positive response from the employees, who are curious to go by every day and see how has it changed today, how has it changed this week. Because areas like that, compared to a flat, dead green lawn, areas like this, they have a huge variation. And there's a lot of life taking place just outside the cantina. So compared to the more like accidental, beautiful area we had here, more like wild area that came more or less despite human activities or in combination with it, this is of course a very designed area, and that can work as well. And even more designed than that. Recently, together with Stadstudio, we tried to take the area of Bunkeflo, that's an architectural competition, and we say, how much life can we squeeze into this fantastic area? Part of it is an old gravel site for limestone and a shooting field and whatever. And all of the different species that you see listed up here is not just some random species that we just find in a book and put there because they're beautiful. There's a strict analysis behind it saying what kind of species would we like to make habitats for in this residential area. And then we see what used to be there, what is in the surroundings, what could be attracted to these areas. And yes, we include some birds and butterflies and bees and flowers and whatever. And here you also see human beings are also very welcome in the area. And that leads us to the practical part of it. So if we really buy into the idea of broadening understanding of life, and if we really buy into the idea, yes, it is also a task for architects to work with life in that broad sense. It should be in a design phase. Of course it should be. But it's also extremely important that when you have designed the beautiful area that can have a broad palette of life, in the building part you cannot just demolish and squeeze and go with big machines on everything. You have to take care of what is already there. And when that's said, you cannot just make it, build it, and then let it be, because the maintenance of it, skötsel, plays a gigantic role in increasing nature quality over time. And finally, but definitely not least, even if you have the great design, good building process, a comprehensive maintenance, it is extremely important how people behave and use the areas. They can use them in a way that is really contributing to the biodiversity, and they can use it in a way that is really destructive for the biodiversity. But in all ways, people in this phase of it, when they move in, when they live their life, when they have the fun, when they do the playing, they can do that along with having a wonderful and diverse nature, if only it is a culture established at an early stage, if only there's an awareness about it. So we work a lot with making the culture possible for having a rich and diverse nature. So to wrap up, I suggest that all of us here today, and whoever watched from distance, we really start to see ourselves, sorry for the misspelling, to see ourselves as a part of the solution to loss of ecosystems and biodiversity, locally as well as globally. There's not somebody else out there who are doing it for us. We are really able to play a significant role in that. But not alone. We really have to align ourselves with different kind of experts. We work with biologists, we work with sociologists, we work with whoever different people that can help us find out how to make this positive coexistence possible. And we have to work not just with nature is here and then culture is there. We have to find a way to merge the two of them. And we have to do it very fast because we are losing species and we're losing populations of species at an unprecedented and alarming rate. So I would very much like to invite all of you to join in for the crucial task of finding out how can we make positive coexistence as a part of our daily work. I mean, most of us here are making manifestations of the current culture and say, okay, we build this house, we develop this urban area, and by that we are forming the culture in the years or decades to come. But if we do that in a way that cannot contain life in the broad sense, we are part of the problem. So we have to rethink nature and architecture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rasmus. It seems we are beginning to build a bridge between nature and architecture. Beautiful friendship, I hope. Now, please welcome Jens Casper.
For the invitation, can you hear me? Yes. Nature and architecture. I was invited to talk about nature and architecture. And I met Rasmus last week in Berlin, and we talked briefly about it, and we tried to find overlappings, and we found them, but they are very abstract. So it's more about cultural activity and practice, because our architectural practice is is not dealing with nature. Nature was never a reference. Our reference is culture, our reference is in the arts. We are dealing with found human artifacts, transforming them. This is our practice. And I thought about it, and I think what we do represent is kind of the architecture you said, like the old-fashioned way, or kind of that. We as architects, we are trained to keep nature out. We build walls and roofs to keep the wind out and the sunlight out, and we break in some windows to take control, but that's it, more or less. And it became even worse with modernism when we invented artificial light and air conditioning and stuff like that, and that is our world, actually. The talk, nonetheless, was very inspiring and made me thinking, but of course, there is no reflection yet in our own work, but we'll see. So my contribution is the cultural practice. I'm here for Marianne Mueller, and our office was invited first, and Marianne was invited, or she was intending to come, but something happened in the meantime. Our practice is actually based in Berlin and in London. Whereas I'm representing the Berlin part, and Marianne and Olaf are representing the London part. But Marianne is also teaching in Stuttgart, I'm teaching in Cottbus, Olaf taught in London. Marianne is flying forth and back, which is causing a lot of stress, so the both of them just moved to Berlin a couple of days ago. And they decided to do so during their holidays, summer holidays. We do it now. And this is why she isn't here, this is why I'm here. And now I have to test this. This is Marianne, yes, exactly. Our practice very much deals within a very artificial context. We are having projects worldwide, in London, in Berlin, in Tokyo and Seoul recently, Paris, Vancouver, and so on, and our clients are more or less all from within the cultural world, art collectors, fashion designers, whatsoever. The project that brought us together is a project in London, White Cube Gallery in Bermondsey Street, an art gallery, and when it was opened, it was the largest European art gallery. White Cube is run by Jay Jopling, who started his first gallery in the beginning of the 2000s on Duke Street in London, and then grew step by step. These two galleries were built by Mike Rondell, and then we came in and did Bermondsey Street, and this is the layout of the, say, gallery parts of the building. And this is just to compare it in size. It's bigger than a football pitch. The gallery itself is housed within an old warehouse in a very Londonish surrounding. It is approached through a small entrance yard. It has a long corridor sticking through. These are the galleries, gallery spaces all over, a small bookshop, auditorium, and it's surrounded by warehouses and packing stuff. And the front yard, it has only one tree, and not three, which is left over, and the tree is an evergreen tree, so it represents always the same natural condition. The front yard does not only allow for access for the public, but also for trucks to load and unload. And we created this big roof, cantilevering roof, to signify the entrance, and a small spatial divider, we called it, to separate the two functions. And this is like the conditions in the night. The pictures are very bad. This is the corridor, and this is like the front yard when there is an opening with a couple of hundred people longing for free beers and some artworks. That's the entrance situation with this big cantilevering roof and the corridor. And actually, the gallery name's White Cube is actually their program, and the color of the walls was defined white. The floor is a concrete floor, and the ceiling was our playground, more or less. And this is like how we define different light conditions. This is a room called 9 by 9 by 9, which is 9 by 9 by 9 meters big. It was intended to have natural light, but during the discussions natural light also is a danger in an art gallery because it bleaches the artworks. So what we have is a ceiling which actually simulates the artificial light which is coming in. So what we have here is a perfect simulation of nature, of a natural condition, in a way. And the view to through the corridor to some smaller galleries in the background, which have an entirely different lighting condition, and then the big galleries, south galleries, with the opening exhibition, which is flexible in space. The same room with a big Anselm Kiefer, on Theaster gates, hanging a fire engine truck from the ceiling, and an Anthony Gormley. This is all the same space, filling up the whole space, and the opening exhibition again. This is a view into the so-called viewing rooms, which are not open to the public, but always set up for, say, rich clients flying in. And the auditorium, where everything is blocked out and blacked out in the end, to be able to present moving images usually. And coincidentally, this was finished in 2011, and in 2013 also a fashion show took place in the corridor, so the corridor was kind of misused. This picture is not official, and the White Cube doesn't like to show it. At the same time, the first catwalk that Casper Müller-Knier designed in Paris for the fashion house Céline. We all again have the ceiling as the main topic here, which is made from gypsum board, rawly finished, and some lighting boxes. View from another perspective and simple seating. Céline, the fashion house, this was like we tested some catwalks, and then we started to create also shops for Céline. Again, the ceiling is very important, and what happened here is also the floor became again a very important topic to work on. It's a marble floor with an image that was transformed into this marble flooring, spatial dividers, and the ceiling again. The spatial dividers creating intimate situations where you have the kind of selling situation and testing clothing situation. And this is Mount Street in London, which was finished in 2014. And this elaboration of material, of a material approach, an artistically material approach, then was refined also. So there were a couple of shops were made that were all based on the same grammar, and then another thing happened that some of the shops also we got the option to create facades, or the facades of the shops. And this one is for a shop in Ginza in Tokyo, where one of the eldest Japanese pottery companies created these facade elements, which all have a different shading and color and depth. And they were set up as a facade. And this facade is not set up randomly and not by an algorithm or whatever, but in a pure cultural artistical act by human beings that defined how to set up the whole thing. This is the facade, a view to the facade. Ginza, and the same in Tokyo. This is also, you would think this is made with grasshopper or whatever. This is different bricks of different lengths and openings of different dimensions. This is all set up in the studio and drawn, hand-drawn. And yes, it's a transformation of a very boring mid-century building during the night. And then what we have here is something, it's another track of what we are working with. This is a site plan of a former industrial site in Dortmund, which is like in the middle of Germany, part of the Ruhr area. And this is a former furnace blast site. So here steel was cooked. And this is kind of an archaeological survey that was done. At the beginning of the transformation process, at the beginning of the end of the industrial area in Dortmund, the furnace stopped producing steel in the beginning of the 2000s as well, 2001, and the whole site was sold to a Chinese company. The Chinese company came and took everything which could be reused in China to cook steel again. They took everything away, and the furnace is at least partly still operating in China. And this is a map of what has been left over. The rest has been cleaned from any danger and has been protected by law and has been listed. And our task was to redesign one of the buildings into an event hall. This started in 2012, an event hall for 3,600 people, for rock concerts at least. And this will be the stage. This is the shell which will house, or which is actually housing 3,600 spectators, but it also means that the shell has to be sound insulated to protect the neighborhoods from the sound which is coming from outside. Also, the shell is being blacked out for the concerts, and it has to be air conditioned, of course. That's the air conditioning monster which had to be installed, and it's like two Straßenbahnen, like urban trains on top of the building, which are reshaping the natural conditions within the building. And two small buildings had been attached. One is a foyer, and the other one is a backstage building for the artists. And we crashed like concrete into the brick environment, worked very roughly with it, installed what is necessary. The building is not yet finished, but already in operation. And we were like The first concert was like knee shaking, every one of us. We were very nervous that the music stopped like from 1 second to the other, but everything went fine. There's a photograph of Wolfgang Tillmans from a bunker in Berlin Mitte. These bunkers were built in hundreds and thousands all over Germany as part of the attacking war that our nation started in the mid-40s, or the end of the 30s until the mid-40s. It was erected to protect 2,500 people sitting there during Allied air raids. It was bought by an art collector to house his art collection in 2003. In the meantime, between war and this purchase, it was used as a fruit and vegetable storage and as a nightclub, and one of the hardest nightclubs on earth. It was called the Bunker. And what we did is we had to transform the thing. How are we in time? I have no. Oh, that's a long time. Okay, so this thing needed to be transformed. This is like diggers had to come. And they were working night and day on this hole on the roof, taking away concrete. And by taking away, one question is raised: what do we keep and what do we protect, or what do we take? What do we keep? What do we take away? And this is the building after the transformation. What we have here is like a clean facade, some trees on the rooftop. This is again very artificial nature, what we have here, and this artificiality also recalls like 18th century images that we have from ruins, which are over and over. My English is going away. I'm sorry. It's like I'm getting older and older from second to second. My English is going away. So we have these trees on the rooftop, an apartment on the rooftop, the collection, the art collection downstairs. The art collection, we had to take away like ceilings and walls to create spaces for the artworks. There's an artwork by Katja Strunz, which has previously been seen in one space, and you entered this big space and you could overlook it in 1 second. And in this new environment, you had to fight to see the whole thing, because these spaces were not clear and not simple. They were multi-dimensional in a way. This is a work by Ai Weiwei. Again, something natural that we find, but very artificial. It's a tree made or constructed in an artistic act from flotsam in one of the biggest spaces that we found, or that we created in the end, within the building, 3 stories high. And this is an element that we added, an elevator which is going from the ground floor, the street level, up to the roof level. There is a new apartment on the top, which itself is like a gallery space or a museum-esque space, which also recalls architectural images that we before had in mind, like Valerio Olgiati's schoolhouse in Paspils, that we found, that we recreated in a way at one situation. Here we have there's a dot painting by Damien Hirst, and this is Anselm Reile, a young German Berlin-based artist as well. The apartment is surrounded by this garden. This is the garden at the very beginning. 2008 this was finished, but it grew and grew and is like, now is really a dense, at least during the summers, it's a really dense green space up there. And we have like the cleaned facade during the years also was used by other people to leave their tags now, so everything is in peace. Also the refurbishment of the facade, so a lot of things were very special, and I often do lectures about this building alone, which last like 30 minutes, because there's a lot to talk about. One thing is that the refurbishment of the facade is like we try to keep all the traces of war that have been there and that have been present in Berlin, especially in the east part of the town, also in the years after the wall fell, but they all disappeared right now. Everyone took away the traces. All the houses have been restored and painted new, plastered new, and we try to keep these traces. And this especially made the company who did this work very unhappy, because they are used, also companies are used to leave really clear and clean surfaces in the end, or like buildings and results. The bunker or the building itself, this was also starring then in a movie, for example, which was very surprising. This photo, I was flying and I saw this movie. Nobody talked to me about it. So saw this space here on the monitor like this in front of me on an airplane TV. And there's a work by Asta Gröting, also a Berlin-based artist who is working with silicone, taking the traces that we left and repaired as part of her own artwork in the end. So there's another building that we did also in Berlin, continuing the process of creating spaces with concrete in this case. The refurbishment or the transformation, let's call it a transformation of a former wastewater pumping station from the 1870s. These pumping stations in Berlin are named Radialsystem. 12 of them are erected or were erected radially around the city center, collecting the wastewater and pumping it out of the city onto fields where the wastewater then was dispersed, and before they invented like modern facilities to clean the water with technical solutions. Yes, this building was transformed into the seat of a communication agency and art book publisher. And we created a concrete sculpture which houses all the functions that were necessary within one body, more or less. Like the reception, there is a copier inside, there is one stair and the second stair, additional workplaces on the second floor. The building itself was also used as a museum for stone sculptures for a couple of years, and some of the stone sculptures were left in the building because no one was interested in them, and we had to deal with them. Although they are still public property, so they are not part of the property of the owner of the building, and the building always has to be opened for the public to, if interested, look at those figures. And of course we use the concrete to create spaces and focus different views into the view trees that are around or into the sky. This was very closely done with the heritage preservationists, of course. And yeah, also this building was kind of misused by dancers from Friedrichstadtpalast, a revue theater around the corner, and photographed in there. And this is the last and very small project I show, which was just taken into operation this year. It regards to the Bauhaus and the third director, Hannes Meyer, who has been the other director of the Bauhaus because he had a clear political agenda and who had to leave the country with the rise of the Nazis. And he did this small pavilion in 1943 to represent the new Nazi order that is taking place in Europe, not to represent it, but to make it public, kind of. And we were asked by a theater company to do a little copy of it. The initial pavilion was built in wood. We did a copy in aluminum because the question was it should be dismantled and built up again on different locations, only for a couple of weeks always. So we did this copy in pure aluminum, just one material, and it is all made from raw material that you can buy in every metal shop in the end. And this building, when they started to operate with it, they always invite other artists and they always test this building. And they set it up in various locations, as said, all over Germany, and also in places that are public, and the more public, the better. And this is the last picture I show, where there is barely no architecture, but as a reminder to the very first image Rasmus showed about the biodiversity, we also have to be aware of the fact not only that we have to create spaces for biodiversity, but also for social diversity, and that all the design that we are doing, somebody mentioned design is everywhere before, which is true, but we also have to be aware that the design we are doing is always has always an impact of our social environment, and that the way we design needs to take this into consideration. This is all I have to say. So I'm sorry for a very nervous lecture. Thanks again for having me, and maybe a few words from your side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jens.
Yes.
Very interesting. You managed to combine nature, architecture, and now culture.
Yes.
Not bad. I have one quick question. And because you have a practice in both Berlin and London, and I truly hope that Boris Johnson will not get in your way. But can you please describe the difference working in different countries, different working cultures and so on?
Yes. No, I can't. No, it is. We did White Cube Bermondsey together, and we did a lot of things together. But it is always hopping between the two cities and between the two cultures. Berlin is way more relaxed than London. This is true. But what is impacting us is more the ways that we have to fly. So it's like the more flights, the worse. It's no good to have it. I mean, it's good for the communication, for everything. It's also great to have someone in London that you can always visit. It's great to have an office in London that you can always drop in and talk to, do great projects. But in the end, this traveling is also brain fucking us in a way. This is why Marianne and Olaf now moved to Berlin, actually, because it's a weird situation in the end. So I mean, it's always when you rely on the plane, you always have to get the plane. When you rely on a train, even if it is a 7 hours train drive, that's relaxed. But London Berlin is would be 12 hours or more on the train, which is not doable. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Thank you again, Jens. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Och jag vill tacka Nätverket, Sveriges Arkitekter, Malmös arkitekter var det i det här fallet. Stort tack Alex och era gäster. Tack för det. Jag tycker vi ger dem en applåd till.